It's night. You look at the moon. It's just there, hanging in the dark, like it's always been hanging there. You don't think much of it. Maybe you take a photo. Maybe you don't even notice it at all. But 40,000 years ago, a human looked at that exact same moon, and it changed everything. They didn't have telescopes. They didn't have physics. They didn't even have written language. But they had something else: obsession. And that obsession may have given birth to the calendar, to religion, to mathematics, and to civilization itself. This is the story of what ancient humans thought when they looked up.
Let's go back, way back, tens of thousands of years before Egypt, before Sumer, before any city ever existed. Archaeologist Alexander Marshak studied a 27,000-year-old bone plate, the Blanchard bone, covered in tiny carved notches. In 1972, he made a wild claim. These weren't random scratches. They were a deliberate tally of the moon's phases. If he's right, it means Ice Age human, people hunting mammoths with stone tools, were already tracking time using the sky. But not everyone agrees. Archaeologist Francesco D'Errico pushed back hard, arguing many of these lunar calendars might just be patterns we want to see. Scientists are still arguing about this exact bone today. Either way, somewhere in that debate is the birth of timekeeping itself.
Fast forward to Mesopotamia, the world's first cities. Here, the moon wasn't just tracked, it was worshipped. The Sumerians deified it as Nanna, later known as Sin, a god believed to control fertility, fate, and the passing of time itself. Archaeoastronomer Anthony Aveni has pointed out something fascinating. Nearly every ancient civilization, completely independently, ended up worshipping or tracking the moon because it was the most obvious, most reliable, most repeatable pattern in the entire sky. No telescope needed, just eyes, patience, and night after night of watching. In Egypt, the moon became the Eye of Thoth, a divine healing eye associated with cosmic order, what the Egyptians called Ma'at. The moon's endless cycle of disappearing and returning wasn't seen as decay. It was seen as proof of regeneration, that destruction and rebirth were just two halves of the same cosmic loop. Now here's where things get genuinely wild. Historian Robert Hanna has documented how Babylonian priest astronomers achieved astonishingly accurate eclipse predictions, centuries before the Greeks ever touched astronomy. No telescopes, no algebra as we know it, just generations of recorded observations passed down like sacred data. They even built complex calendar systems, what we now call the Metonic cycle, just to keep the messy, mismatched lunar and solar years in sync. This wasn't superstition, this was ancient data science. In China, the moon represented something deeper than a god. It represented yin, feminine energy, stillness, immortality. This is where the legend of Chang'e comes from, a story so old and so beloved, it's still celebrated today during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Sinologist Edward Schaefer, who spent decades studying Tang-era cosmology. Schaefer argued that Chinese court astronomers treated the moon not just as myth, but as a working part of an organized cosmic bureaucracy, something to be tracked, ranked, and reported on like a government official. Halfway across the world, the Aztecs told a violent version of the same fascination. Their goddess Coyolxauhqui, the moon herself, is depicted dismembered, defeated by her brother, the sun god. Every night, that myth replayed in the sky. Art historian Cecilia Klein argued that the famous Coyolxauhqui stone wasn't just religious art, it was a political statement, reminding every citizen what happened to those who challenged the sun. In Indigenous Australian Dreamtime stories, the waxing and waning moon wasn't science, it was morality. Ancestral beings tied the moon cycles to lessons about life, death, and balance. Astrophysicist and science historian Dwayne Hamaker has shown that many Aboriginal communities encoded precise lunar tidal relationships into oral storytelling, preserving accurate astronomical knowledge for thousands of years without a single written record. In ancient Greece, something new happened: doubt. While most people still worship the moon through cults like Artemis and Diana, the philosopher Anaxagoras proposed something radical: that moonlight wasn't divine glow at all, but reflected sunlight. He was nearly killed for the idea. This was the moment mythology started colliding with science. In Norse mythology, the moon was being hunted. A wolf named Hati chased it endlessly across the sky, and when the wolf finally caught it, that would mark the beginning of Ragnarok, the end of the world. Religious historian Hilda Ellis Davidson suggested this myth wasn't just storytelling. It likely functioned as an early cultural explanation for lunar eclipses, turning a frightening astronomical event into a story people could actually make sense of.
Meanwhile, across the vast Pacific Ocean, Polynesian wayfinders were using lunar phases as literal navigation tools, crossing thousands of miles of open ocean using nothing but stars, swells, and the moon. Cultural astronomer Jarita Holbrook has shown similar independent systems were developed across Africa.
Different cultures, oceans apart, all reaching the same conclusion. The moon is a clock you can sail by.
Then comes one of the most jaw-dropping objects in archaeology, the Antikythera Mechanism. A 2,000-year-old Greek device packed with bronze gears, capable of modeling the moon's irregular orbit with mechanical precision. Many historians call it the world's first analog computer.
It predicted eclipses by hand-cranked gear. In Siberian shamanic traditions, the moon represented a doorway, a liminal space between the world of the living and the world of spirits, often accessed through trance states during specific lunar phases. Anthropologist Mircea Eliade, in his foundational studies of shamanism, described the moon as one of the most universal symbols of death and rebirth across shamanic cultures worldwide, a recurring pattern he found almost everywhere he looked.
Across nearly every ancient culture, one event terrified rulers more than war: the lunar eclipse. From Babylon to Rome to ancient China, eclipses were almost universally interpreted as omens of the death of kings or the collapse of empires. Entire emergency rituals were performed just to protect the throne.
Assyriologist Erica Reiner translated Babylonian omen texts, revealing an entire bureaucratic system built around eclipses. Court astrologers were required to report them immediately.
Finally, high in the Andes, the Inca worshipped Mama Killa, the moon mother, whose cycles were fused directly into the agricultural calendar, dictating exactly when to plant and when to harvest. Archaeoastronomer Brian Bauer has documented how Inca ceremonial sites near Cusco were deliberately aligned to track both solar and lunar cycles together, blending skywatching directly into the empire's farming and political calendar. Different continents, different languages, different gods, but the same moon. And somehow, without ever speaking to each other, ancient humans across the entire planet looked up at that same pale circle in the sky and arrived at strikingly similar conclusions: that it mattered, that it could be measured, and that it was trying to tell them something.
So tonight, when you step outside and glance up at the moon for 2 seconds before going back inside, remember, for thousands of years, that exact same act was how humanity learned to count time, build calendars, predict the future, and ultimately understand its place in the universe. It's night. You look at the moon, and now you know what they saw.